Today, on the Angry Catholic Show, we're going to tackle another deception collection. Our angry item of the day is spiritual manipulation. And should the USCCB be sued for fraud? Welcome. You're listening to The Angry Catholic Show. I'm Paul the Angry Catholic with my wife Chris and Michael Hichborn from the Lepanto Institute. Back in 2002, we were all told by the bishops that they were going to fix the abuse problem in the church. Well, in 2013, a priest that our family was close with was arrested in a car with a 15-year-old boy. Last year, Ed Locke, the music director for St. Nicholas Parish in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, was caught on video and text luring what he thought was a 15-year-old boy to his house at midnight. And our bishop never told the parishioners why he was removed from ministry. Last October, Father Lockney, who was the first seminarian Bishop Bambera ever ordained to the priesthood, was arrested for luring two minor boys to his house. Other than a general statement from the diocese, crickets. But the bishops continue to assure us that they have taken care of the problem, and yet none of the bishops are investigating how this happened and continues to happen. Today, sexual abuse survivors are being re-abused by diocesan authorities who ignore and stonewall those seeking justice. If Catholics don't speak up and get involved, the message from a few can continue to be ignored by the bishops. Now, I'm very excited having Michael Hichborn from the Lepanto Institute with us today. Thank you for joining us again, Michael.
Thanks so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure talking to you guys.
Now, you're definitely not one to ignore all this stuff going on in the church. But the Lepanto Institute for the Restoration of All Things in Christ is a research and education organization dedicated to the defense of the Catholic Church against assaults from without as well as from within. Whether in the form of armies, heretics, or traitors, the church has always faced enemies seeking her destruction. Today, the church faces all three. Now, we came in with another deception collection, and we had talked about this. What was that?
It was the CCHD collection,
CCHD,
Catholic Campaign for Human Development.
And it was
that
a
comes
couple
in the
months
fall.
ago, right?
Yeah, and that was the first deception collection, that we talked about.
Yeah, and
Yep.
And literally, Michael, a few years ago, I had no idea that large Catholic organizations would ever give money to support other organizations that actively undermine the actual fundamental teachings of the church. And, you'd have to be either ignorant, as I was, or really not care where your money goes. And because you're the expert and you've been looking into things like this for literally decades, we're coming up to Lent. And we're going to have a season, at least here in our diocese. That's what we did last year, and I'm pretty sure the year before. It's kind of a regular thing where we do Operation Rice Bowl for every collection. I'm pretty sure for the entire Lent season. So where are these donations going?
So Operation Rice Bowl is a Catholic Relief Services collection. What they do is they give kids in their CCD classes, and they hand out little rice bowls at the back of the church, and they say, hey, take your extra change and put it in the rice bowl, and you can help feed hungry families. At least that's what they claim.
We did it for years with our kids. It was like in the center of the table. It was a part of Lent, not knowing the problem. What's the problem?
So the problem is that Catholic Relief Services is consistently partnering with organizations overseas that are directly promoting, financing, supporting, and encouraging the use of contraception and condoms. And routinely, I have even caught Catholic Relief Services promoting condom use in their own documentation.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know there's Catholics out there, Michael, that would say, that, what's the problem with condoms? And, at least it's making things safe and not spreading things or blah, blah, blah. But the issue really first, there are great teachings that you can read on this in the Catholic Church. If you look up the theology of the body, if you look up Humanae Vitae, and then actually too, science, if you go to actual scientific studies, the condom usage effectiveness it's measured only in a lab. It's not measured effectiveness based on like people using it. And so it actually isn't not as effective as people think with stopping the spread of STDs and things like that. The bigger issue here is the fact that if you're going to be teaching something and embracing something and having people live something, which is not participating in contraceptive measures and having a life that is open and generous to life, it really is offensive to then take people who believe in that, take their money, and then do a bait and switch and have it go to things that like we fundamentally don't agree with. Like, well, it's so
not
arrogant.
Even just a matter of not agreeing, right? The essential problem is that the use of contraception outside of marriage is a mortal sin. The use of contraception inside of marriage is a mortal sin. Mm-hmm. So if you are promoting the use of contraception in any way, shape, or form, whether it's the barrier method, the IUD, a pill, an injection, whatever the measure, the use, the promotion of those things is a direct, it really falls under the definition of scandal, because you are leading someone else to commit those sins when you're promoting them. So CRS, in their documentation where they're encouraging condom use, which, by the way, so that's the other part of the equation. CRS actually says, well, we don't do that. We don't ever do that, which is a big fat lie. How many times do I have to find their own documentation where they said, yes, we encourage condoms, and here's our program that encourages kids to use condoms. But then they lie about it.
Yeah, well, I used to be shocked by that. Unfortunately, I'm not anymore. Isn't that sad? I think that's par for the course. You know, the other thing, I know, having worked in the pro-life movement and done a lot of research in, I guess, during like the Beijing population conference in the 90s, that always, it's never even just giving a condom or giving an IUD. It's always attached to other funding and food or medicine. It's really like a form of colonialism, and it's very offensive to people in the third world. You know, you have people who live there that want to have a large family. Their children are their joy. You have people who have deep religious convictions against using contraception. I mean, my husband and I are one of those people. And then to tie aid to it, it's never just one organization just handing out condoms. They tie aid, they tie all sorts of things. They educate people in a way where they treat them like they're pets or something. Like, it's just because when you're introducing that in, you're devaluing human life. And the whole way it's done is so offensive. And then here in the United States, having us fund it with a little rice bowl on our table at Lent with our kids, the whole thing is just so offensive.
Well, you know, one of the largest funders of CRS is the government agency called USAID. Now, it actually operates as a quid pro quo, because what happens is CRS goes to the federal government and says, "Oh, we would like for you to consider encouraging more funding for USAID in your appropriations bill, so that when it comes time to determine the budget, we would like to make sure that USAID is well funded." And then USAID says, "Oh, guess what? You scratched our back just enough. We'll go ahead and award you this grant and that grant." And so what happens, CRS becomes an agency of USAID, and when it accepts a grant from USAID, it actually implements USAID programs. So it becomes a subsidy of the federal government and not an agency of the Catholic Church in that instance. So what's really disturbing about this is that when USAID was created in 1961, Provision 4, paragraph 4, subsection B of section 102 states that in order to make possible consistent and informed judgments in this respect, in other words, how much funding is going to go to certain poor countries, the president shall assess the commitment and progress of countries in moving toward the objective and purposes of this chapter by utilizing criteria including, but not limited to, the following. And point A is increasing in agricultural productivity. Point B is reduction of infant mortality. And point C is control of population growth. So USAID was created specifically as a population control program, and CRS is happily taking their money to expand their influence in the third world.
It's so offensive.
Now, when you give your money to the Rice Bowl, I'm assuming it goes all into the CRS pot first. Am I right on that?
Yeah, so the Rice Bowl collection all goes towards Catholic Relief Services. Now, here's another statistic to consider when you give to the Rice Bowl campaign. Routinely, about every year, the Rice Bowl campaign pulls in about $7 or $8 million. About $2.5 million of that money covers the top 10 paid employees at CRS. 10 people at CRS getting paid $2.5 million. The CEO of CRS is pulling in $500,000 a year.
Wow.
So these people are getting rich to help the poor, and they are exploiting the Rice Bowl. People who think that money is going towards helping the poor, what they're doing is covering the cost of the administration, and it's disgusting.
Yeah, that's a healthy percentage from that figure, from the gross.
That's like 20% of what you're giving, at least.
Closer to 30.
Oh, yeah. Over 20, you're right, is going to their salaries.
Yep.
Wow.
Well, no, he just said a few of the salaries. So the total administrative cost could be more like 50% on that.
Oh, I mean, the administrative costs at CRS, the salaries, the average salary at CRS is over $120,000 a year. That's the average.
That's somebody doing missionary work, helping the poor, right?
But even those lower hirelings are still pulling in a decent, they're pulling in a decent salary too.
Wow.
And all of this.
So this isn't a calling.
It's disgusting to think that an agency of the Catholic Church is paying people to do charity. How is that charity?
Oh, gosh.
That's unbelievable.
It really is.
But this is the problem this is what happens when you move away from the missionary model, where you are taking missionaries whose sole purpose it is to spread the gospel, to go into these third world countries and to help the poor with their own hands and without taking a salary, just allowing people to feed them and house them on their own. And that's the way it's supposed to work. No overhead, just pure charity. But instead, now we're paying workers to go in and we're calling it charity. That's not charity. That's industry.
That's right. And also, that's an excellent point, because when you have someone who goes in as a real missionary, not a $120,000 a year missionary, and you're getting, people are housing you that you're living with, and you're literally living with the people. You're one of them. You're in relationship in the community, and so you're acting in a way, I would think, where you're understanding the dignity of these people, rather than coming in like Catholic Relief Services and their group, USAID, and treating people like they're with such condescension and such arrogance. And then you mentioned something, this really hit me, that USAID, this population control group that CRS is partners with. I mean, as Catholics, Christ said the poor will always be with us. We're certainly supposed to help each other and be charitable. We're not supposed to try to downsize the poor by making sure they're never born.
Well, you realize that one of CRS's primary goals, and they've been saying this for the last 15 years now, is that they want to eliminate poverty. Now, I don't know how you do that, especially if there are mendicant orders where there are people who are voluntarily poor. But even from a practical standpoint, how do you eliminate poverty except to have communism? But even communism, where everybody is sharing in the wealth equally, you're not going to. Everybody is. The problem with communism is that everybody's equally poor. Not going to have a universal prosperity system. That's an impossible dream.
But the church isn't here to eliminate poverty.
That's right. But they think it is.
Yeah, well, I got some ways that they could, you know what, though? If that is really what they want to do, I mean, I got some ways that they could move towards that a little bit and share the blessings. Sell the headquarters in Washington, D.C., that huge building. Get rid of the rectory off of Embassy Row for the Archbishop of Washington. I mean, wow. I mean, I got some things they could do that could at least alleviate a little bit, right?
Well, maybe the CEO could take his $500,000 a year salary and start using that to buy groceries for poor people. I mean, the hypocrites, right? They are extreme hypocrites.
Absolutely.
Now, Michael, I remember us talking a while back, and just update us or keep us up to date on how much government money is coming into the CRS currently or in the last year or so.
So about a third of everything that CRS makes in a year is government funding.
Okay.
And the last figure that I saw, they were right around $1 billion.
Oh, my gosh.
For a year?
Yeah.
A billion?
$1 billion, yes, with a B.
I have to ask, and we might not know, but did they take PPP? What is it called? The funds?
Yeah, the PPP money.
Did they take the PPP
Yes, they
money?
did.
Oh,
Yes,
my
they did.
gosh. Oh,
Yeah.
gosh.
So, they're certainly not short on funds. It's absolutely disgusting the way they approach things. By the way, and I have to tell you this anecdote. Do we have time for an anecdote?
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
yeah.
Okay. So I've met with CRS brass a number of times to explain to them the things that I've been finding and to get them to answer my questions, which they never do. They never, ever answered anything. It was just, I'm going to look into that and I'll let you know. They never got back to me. Surprise. But at one point, the moral theologian that was in the room representing them was saying, well, you seem to disagree with the model of the way we do things, because I was complaining that CRS doesn't evangelize. I said, how can you call yourself a Catholic agency if all you do is go out there and do, whatever feeding and housing and clothing and all that kind of stuff? Let's say that that's all they did and the contraception stuff wasn't there. How can they call themselves Catholic if all they're doing are those things without doing any kind of evangelization? And they said, well, we do it by example. I said, but your workers aren't even Catholic. In fact, because you're taking government money, you can't even exclusively hire Catholics. You have to hire Muslims. You have to hire atheists. So how can they be an example if what they're doing is just, do-gooder work and wearing a CRS logo? How is that evangelizing? And the moral theologian priest that they had in the room with them said, well, when I was in India, I went to an Indian hospital, one of Mother Teresa's hospitals, and there was this Indian who was he was on a bed and he was dying, and they would see a priest come in and they would be so joyful. And I went in and I saw this Indian who was dying, and I sat down and I held his hand as he died. And I said, well, Father, did you baptize him? Did you try to preach the gospel? And he said, well, no, there was a language barrier. I said, okay, but did you at least try to save his soul? I said, what did you do? He said, well, I held his hand. I said, Father, let me explain to you what you just did. You held a banquet, and he was allowed to smell the food as he was dying. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And he said, well, we just disagree. I said, Father, you let his soul slip away from God. That's on you.
Wow.
But that's how they think.
And we fund it. We're We're funding
Billions.
it. We're giving the money through our tax dollars and then in our rice bowls.
All right, you can listen to us on KCRD-FM, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Google Play, and Spotify, and find us, as always, at theangrycatholic.com. Send us an email to mail@theangrycatholic.com. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We're back. You're listening to The Angry Catholic Show. I'm Paul the Angry Catholic with my wife Chris and Michael Hichborn from the Lepanto Institute. Now, for our angry item of the day, we came in with spiritual manipulation. But before we get right into that, I just want to bring up and address something that's keeping faithful Catholics from getting involved. And there's this idea or belief that we can't dare challenge our bishops. And for me personally, I still have a hard time about some of the things that we talk about. And I get it that most Catholics that have no idea what's going on right under their nose wouldn't dare challenge their bishop. But we have to find some way to share the facts and allow this information to sink in a little bit. Because the thought of not challenging our bishops after the destruction they've caused, and yes, they have caused it, is just unbearable. Mm-hmm. You know, and I know you don't have that issue, Michael. I mean,
No, not in the least. I don't know what you're talking about.
So I actually, Chris, why don't you brought up a great point about our, this idea of whether it's from the pulpit or coming from an advertisement, they kind of make you think if you don't support, like in our diocese, for example, Vision 2030, which is our bishop's way of basically putting lipstick on a pig. We have all this disaster, and he's making it sound like, we're going to have these engaging parishes, and which we really don't for the most part. But share what your thoughts.
Well, yeah,
on.
I just think it's this spiritually manipulative the way things are done. You can't ask for answers regarding the sex abuse crisis. No one's asking you to these days to stick out a tough marriage. You're not hearing the talk about from the pulpit about, forgive your parents, forgive this person. Find a way to have Christmas dinner with your sibling, like things that are super hard for people. And you're not hearing any of that. You're not hearing about try to not look at porn and get some help because it's probably ruining your marriage and hurting your family. like there's all these things we're not told. And you're right. And then from the pulpit, you're hearing, Vision 2030 or time for change and you're the change, or these slogans and the idea that you want to do something, you want to be active, you do this, and basically what it is it's always a marketing campaign to put money in an envelope.
Yeah.
or get behind this new vision that we have for our diocese and come to the meeting and get excited about your voice, as we're really just trying to organize a way to close a bunch more churches. And you're supposed to be excited about it. And what's manipulative is it's caged as if somehow these things are piety and holiness, when it really is get out there every day and love your family, get to Mass, get to the sacraments, get to adoration, and every day live it. So I'm tired of being manipulated. And I'm tired also even of fellow Catholics who, when you say something about the bishop, like Paul is famous for saying he's a criminal. And
Who, me?
Yeah, and people go, oh, that quick, like I can't believe you said that about a bishop. You know what? I can't believe we say that about a bishop either. I can't believe we say that about multiple bishops. Like, I can't believe that I can name bishops who let people get sodomized as children and they looked the other way and didn't go to the authorities. Like, I can't believe it either. Not saying it is not a form of piety. It's not even Christian. I don't know. What do you think, Michael?
So there is a sin, it's actually a heresy called quietism, which is this idea that somehow the best way to handle difficulties in the church is to stick your head in the sand and go and try and pray it away, as opposed to addressing the issue as it is. That's not the way the church has ever acted. The church always confronts sin on its face. Regardless of who commits it, the church always confronts sin. So when you have somebody like Father James Martin going around and telling everybody that, well, we need to let students be able to pick which bathroom and which gender pronouns they want to use, not only is he not speaking for the church, he is speaking against the church. And to not call out the error and call it what it is, heresy, then you are a part of the problem.
I don't think I've heard of the quietism. I know we've talked about that, but I've never heard that as a heresy.
Yeah, it's. I'm trying to remember where it was defined, but the idea of quietism is this idea that you don't actually address scandals in the church. You just simply pray for the people that are involved.
You sure that's not bishopism?
Well, USCCB heresy. I don't know.
No, but they're not quiet. They pick and choose what they're going to talk about. You know what? It's funny because I remember years ago, at least 15 years ago, I was talking to a priest in spiritual counseling, and I said to him I was getting upset about somebody in the church who I felt was leading people astray and taking advantage of people. And I was getting really upset. And I remember he said, Kristen, now if I were going down an alley, I'd want you with me at the side of in that dark alley. But not everything's a fight. And I'm like, okay. I'm just afraid though. I don't want to be that person who doesn't speak up. And he's like, I don't think that's something you're going to have to worry about. Sometimes you have to learn when not to speak up. So I don't know that what I would fall into is quietism. But I can see where sometimes it just does seem easier because you're not going to lose friends. You're going to be, this wonderful Christian-looking woman in your parish, and you're not going to have your faith challenged at all. It's going to seem really nice and warm and feel good. If you do just okay, I'm just going to pray. I'm part of this pray group. Obviously, I need to just up my prayers. And I'm not downing prayer. I mean, I think prayer is important. But C.S. Lewis said that one, that famous quote when they asked him about his wife who was dying, well, are you praying to God to change things? And he said, we don't pray to God to change things. We pray to God to change ourselves. That's what it's supposed to be.
Well, when I think of, how many times have we seen in the movies or in television shows where somebody is a friend of the unpopular person, but they're in the popular crowd. They go off with the popular crowd somewhere, and at one point the popular crowd starts talking about this unpopular person that's friends with this other person, and they should speak up, but they don't. And they hear everybody kind of mocking this person. You see the unpopular person around a corner just kind of listening in and sees the friend and wishes they would speak up and realizes they're not really a friend because they won't. We've seen that over and over in television shows, on commercials, in movies, whatever it is, that scenario pops up all the time. Now, it's cliche, it's trite, it's overdone, but the thing is, how many times do people remain silent when one of their friends blasphemes or takes the Lord's name in vain? And we know for a fact that he's just around the corner listening in. He's right there waiting for us to speak up. Or how many times does somebody start promoting an idea that is insulting, not only to our Lord, but insulting to the church or insulting to Our Lady? It insults purity. It insults justice. Whatever the situation may be, how many times do we have that scenario where we are in a position to speak up and we don't? And how can we do that if we think about our Lord being just around the corner waiting for us to say something.
To finish up the segment, our bishops are really the ones that should be looking into, where this money's going that they're in charge of. They should be reporting to us. They should be letting us know, being good stewards of all these donations that they're collecting. And unfortunately, they're not. So we definitely want to help organizations that do the heavy lifting. And I would consider the Lepanto Institute one of those. I mean, Michael Hichborn has been doing this even before the Lepanto Institute, before he formed the Lepanto Institute. But he's been doing the heavy lifting. He's doing the investigative work. He's following these leads. He's finding out in detail where this money is going so he can share this so we can make good informed decisions as Catholics on where to put our money. So if you want to help and you can help, it's lepantoin.org.
lepantoin.org/donate.
Donate. Okay.
To be able to help out what you're doing.
If you're concerned about these issues, it's very important for us to share this information. Chris and I, along with a group of supporters, publish this show and want to ask for your help by sharing it. Email it, post it on social media, text it, or just tell somebody about it. You can be sure if you don't, then nothing will change. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We're back. You're listening to The Angry Catholic Show. I'm Paul the Angry Catholic with my wife Chris and Michael Hichborn from the Lepanto Institute. Now for our final segment, we came in with the question, should the USCCB be sued for fraud? I think we all have a good amount to be said about this. But if you could share with us, Michael, you had made a presentation at the Enough is Enough rally in Baltimore, and that idea of fraud and some of the things that the USCCB has done came up.
Yes. So it started off by giving an update on the class action lawsuit against the USCCB regarding the Peter's Pence collection. Because it's very evident, very clear that Peter's Pence, the Vatican's, actually the Pope's personal charitable collection, Peter's Pence money has been used to do things like invest in posh apartments in London and to invest in disgusting movies like Rocket Man. So, and there have been other uses of the money that have been fraudulent and untoward. So, because of that, and because the USCCB, when they put out the materials for Peter's Pence, says, oh, all the money is going toward helping the poor and helping the disenfranchised and spreading and propagating the faith, which some of the money does go toward, but not all. So the problem is that they are fraudulently misrepresenting what the collection is for. And at the summit, or at the event Enough is Enough rally, what I said was that the USCCB collects money through the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, ostensibly for community organizing measures that are helping to raise people out of poverty. But the problem is that those measures are going toward organizations that are pushing abortion, pushing contraception, pushing homosexuality, and pushing outright Marxist revolution. And every time they get caught, the USCCB says, oh, that's not true. We never give money to organizations that go against. That's a lie. That's a lie. And as they're collecting money, they are propagating that lie, which means that they are collecting money fraudulently. Same thing with Catholic Relief Services. Whenever I come out with a new report and I talk about how CRS is promoting contraception, it's promoting condoms, for crying out loud, in 2020, one of my reports showed CRS's own documentation how they were implementing a referral network in Cameroon and a health referral network in Nigeria that were both including contraception and abortion-promoting organizations. They were directly introducing young girls to pro-contraception, pro-abortion organizations for the purpose of sexual and reproductive health services. It's right there in their own documentation. But CRS routinely claims, oh, we have nothing to do with the promotion of abortion, contraception, or anything like that. That's all other organizations if that happens. But, we're not part of anything that does anything like that, which is a lie. Yeah. It's a direct and bold-faced lie. So what we recommend at some point is that we need to have a class action lawsuit against the USCCB specifically for those fraudulent collections.
Sure. Well, really quick, one of the CCHD collection, didn't they give, is they're giving to groups to lift people out of poverty or something that they say? I mean, they gave to a community organization in South Side of Chicago that Barack Obama worked for, right? For his political organizing. That's the kind of grants they give, right? That's
correct. In fact, a friend of mine was able to obtain a copy of the check that the Archdiocese of Chicago wrote directly to Barack Hussein Obama. And that was when he was still just a community organizer, and then somehow he became head honcho of the United States.
President.
I think somehow, how do you evangelize in the midst of this mess? Until this money train dries up for these bishops,
and these organizations, yeah.
Where do you send people? This is crazy town.
It is crazy town, but when it comes to evangelization, I think it's best for us to be as upfront about the situation in the church as we can and say, despite all of this, the truth is the truth. The sacraments are still the sacraments, and that's where salvation is found. So these men, absolutely, they are wicked. They are doing wicked things. They are promoting wicked agendas and wicked programs. However, the truth of the church does not change. You can take a diamond and throw it in a sewer, and it's still a diamond. So in that respect, we can evangelize by saying there is an eternal diamond to be gained here in the church and nowhere else. If you're willing to fight and dig for it, then you will find it, and you will find your salvation there.
Yeah.
But if you don't, well, then there's nothing left to be found.
It just seems at every turn, though, whether we're talking about, the cover-up of the abuse scandal, whether it's the money in this case, whether it's, the poor catechesis, and I agree with your point on the diamond. It's there. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be doing this.
Right.
We wouldn't even waste our time. But, man, Catholics have to somehow take a stand, and in this case, it's with their pocketbook. Spend your money in other ways to help the poor and to support the church. You can't. I just don't see how you can give to these collections when your money's going to these giant salaries and anti-Catholic organization. It's diabolically. It's opposed to our faith. It's unbelievable.
Michael, I have a question for you. You have Catholic Campaign for Human Development, Catholic Relief Services, you have the Peters Pence, you have all these collections. Are they now, when you're giving, don't they have endowments now or something? Or I don't know what the proper word is, where you're giving, we give, you give from your pocketbook, and they put it into investments so that they have they do some of their charity off the interest of their investments and all that. Am I correct with that? It's not just a simple, hey, Kristen gave $10, this one gave, whatever comes in just goes right out to people.
So, yeah, the financing that goes into the USCCB, if you give to, for instance, the Campaign for Human Development, and please don't, but if you do, then that money is earmarked specifically for that department. That doesn't necessarily mean that the money is going toward the agency that they're giving money to or whatever. It can also go to salary. It can go to production of materials. It could go to website maintenance. for that particular department. It's a categorical allotment. So it could even sit in the USCCB's CCHD bank account. It could even just sit there and accrue interest. So it all depends on how the money is spent and used and what their budget is every year. And the problem is that nobody's really allowed to give a thorough examination in their books because they are classified as a religion, which means that there's no oversight except for the bishops, and they turn around and they say, well, we've investigated ourselves and found that we have not committed any kind of fraud.
Yeah. Wow. Could we, instead of giving, I'm just going to put this out here, instead of giving to these organizations, could we pool our money and find an attorney and do our own class action suit and charge the fraud?
I think we should. I think that should be done. And if anybody knows any lawyers who are experienced in class action lawsuits, please contact me because I'm very interested in filing one.
What do you think, Paul?
Well, I think the first thing I would do if I had the means to, hire an attorney, mine would be to sue some of the Catholic schools and Catholic universities for like breach of contract because.
You don't want to just go after the money, though? I mean, that's the, the heart of it.
I think that's a great
money.
idea. I just think me personally, I think the Catholic schools, I think we'll look back in history and we'll see that the Catholic education system was probably one of the main pillars of what has just destroyed the church, at least in this country.
I agree. The problem is you're not going to be able to get a class action lawsuit against the category of Catholic schools. Every individual school would have to be sued by former students who can then say, you promised me a Catholic education, but everything you taught me was all communism.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what I was talking about. When you don't have that example, like you were saying before, like there isn't that example in the schools, and you don't have the Catholic teaching. You're giving these students a very fake, superficial understanding of what it means to be Catholic. I mean, I personally think you'd be better off going into the public school system knowing that you're not getting anything Catholic here than sending them to a Catholic organization where they're Catholic in name and they're behaving the same way and believing the same thing that the world believes. And I think it's fraud.
Yeah, that's fraud.
Oh, of course it's fraud.
Questions. So we have the fraud in the Catholic schools, and then we have the fraud here with these organizations. And but how do you argue, I guess, or defend if someone's going to say, if you bring a lawsuit, a suit based on the fraud, a class action suit, it seems like a scorched earth policy with the church, that you're trying to just take everything down and you're negating all the good charitable work that the church has done because the church is the largest social services provider in the world.
Well, the response to that is that no human endeavor has ever torn down the church. But there have been times of pruning where our Lord says that it is time to pull back from the luxuries that we've enjoyed so that we can have a richer, more abundant fruit. It's like pruning grapes. It's actually important to prune back the branches, because if you don't, then the branches that you had been producing grapes on not only will they not produce as many, but they won't be as rich. Mm-hmm. You have to prune them back in order to allow new branches to grow so that you can have full, flavorful, nutritious grapes growing on those vines. So there has to be a pruning. And what we have right now are rotten branches producing rotten fruit. And if we're going to see good fruit coming from these branches, we have to prune.
You know what? I love this image, and I think it's getting misinterpreted because I've heard faithful Catholics say, we're just going to be a smaller church, but we'll be a more holy church. And and I've heard that in the context of not wanting to hear about the sex abuse scandal and not wanting to care about people who have been victimized from it. It seems like we're willing to close a couple church buildings. It seems like we're willing to lose a generation of Catholics and call it a pruning. We're willing to turn our back on survivors who really feel like re-victimized when they come into a church. And we're willing to turn our back and call that a pruning. And we're under this false idea that we're going to have these rich grapes. And yet really what you're doing, Michael, is where the pruning has to happen. It has to be exposing all of this garbage and perhaps a class action lawsuit and bringing down some of these majorly corrupt, quote, Catholic organizations that are rotten, festering grapes.
The church just can't flourish as long as we're financing our enemies.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like that's where the pruning is. It's not getting rid of people, right?
Right.
Not being willing to lose people.
Right.
Yeah, Mike, I don't know if you'll remember this, but it just came to me while we were talking about this. You had brought up, or actually I had asked you a question the last time you were on about, and I think it might have been contraception, or it could have been something to do with that. But I asked you this question, and I said, how do you continue to keep talking about this and keep sharing this information and keep banging this drum when most people, including Catholics, don't even believe in some of the things, obviously in the church teaching, but they don't believe that contraception is wrong or abortion is wrong. And I don't know if do you remember that answer that you told me, or do you want me to share that?
If I recall, because the question that you asked me was, how do I keep going?
Yes.
Okay, and the answer is that I look at what I do the same way an looks at getting rid of termites in the foundation of a house. He knows there are termites. He sees evidence of termites, but he would be frustrated until he finds the nest. So he digs and digs and digs until he finds the nest. And then if you were to see the look on the face of that exterminator when he finally finds the termite nest where the queen is sitting, he's elated. He's excited because now he knows where to place all the traps and he knows where to place all of the poison in order to exterminate the termite infestation. And then he can get rid of the problem. So I look at the work that I do as a diagnosis, and the results really and truly are not mine. I'm not trying to gain any result from the work that I do. What I'm doing is laying the blueprint, setting the foundation, and the results are Our Lady's entirely. Whatever she wants to do with this information and how it plays out in salvation history, that's up to her. All I'm doing is following the trail and exposing the rot where it is, so that at some point, someone who has the authority to do something about it will be able to take that information and say, here's the problem, this is how we fix it.
All right, you can find Michael Hichborn at lepantoin.org. Thank you for listening to The Angry Catholic Show. Send us an email to mail@theangrycatholic.com. Don't forget to share this show any way you can. I want to thank all the listeners who sent emails this week. Thank you, Chris. Special thanks to Michael Hichborn. Stay active, stay alert, and stay angry.
This has been a production of Dumb Ox Media, Inc. All rights reserved.